I came home one night exhausted from work, only to find my wife whispering sweet nothings to her ex-boyfriend in our living room. My world crumbled. The woman I loved, betraying me in our own home. But I didn't crumble. I liquidated every asset we owned, vanished without a trace, and started anew on a ranch. There, I found solace and even love again. And when danger threatened my new home, I stood strong, saving the ranch and proving my worth. Now, I'm engaged to the rancher's daughter, living the life I never imagined. I thought today couldn't get any worse. I was wrong. My week at work had been awful. To top it off, my boss yelled at me for someone else's mistake. Then, I got home and found my sister-in-law's car blocking the driveway. I couldn't even park in front of my house because the neighbor's teenage son had friends over and there were cars everywhere. I had to park 3 houses down. I didn't even want to go inside. My wife's sister, Susan, and I never got along. She hated me from the day we met. And I wasn't expecting any affection from my wife, Janice, that night. We hadn't been intimate in almost a month, no matter how hard I tried. As I walked up the driveway, I saw the empty garbage can by the curb. I moved it around the side of the house and through the gate. I set the can by the back door and went into the kitchen. I heard music from the living room and my wife and her sister talking. I grabbed a beer from the fridge, opened it, and took a long sip before heading to the living room. Just as I reached the door, I heard something that stopped me in my tracks. God, he was with me 3 times today. That wasn't my sister-in-law's voice. It was my wife's. Since Brandon came back last month, I can't get enough of him. Brandon was Janice's ex-boyfriend who had left her and moved away. So what's next? Susan asked. Brandon wants me to move in with him, so I'll get a lawyer and file for divorce, Janice replied. This is a community property state, so I'll get half of everything. I had heard enough. Feeling numb, I walked back to my car. I realized why Janice hadn't been close to me. She was with someone else and now wanted half of everything. Worst part, the state would give it to her. Janice and I got married 3 years ago. She quit her job right after the wedding. At home, she never did anything. I hired a maid to clean the house and do the laundry 3 times a week. The maid even made dinner on those days. The rest of the time, I cooked or we ordered out. You might think I was foolish, but I was in love and didn't see the truth. She kept me happy with affection until a month ago. My mom died when I was 13. It was tough for my dad and me because she was the heart of our family. In time, we managed to move on. Dad raised me well and we were very close. It hit me hard when he died because of a drunk driver when I was 23, a year before I met Janice. Dad left me everything. I inherited almost $2.5 million, which was a lot, but nothing huge in today's world of rich entrepreneurs. I kept the money invested and, with good advice from a broker, made it grow. Even though Janice tried to spend all I earned, I had another $100,000 in savings. I had no prenuptial agreement because I believed our marriage would last forever. That mistake meant she could take almost half of my money, all for sharing my life, and the state would allow it. She said she would get a lawyer, meaning she hadn't yet. I had time to act. Sitting in my car, a plan started forming in my mind. I watched in the rearview mirror and waited until I saw Susan's car leave. I started my car, turned around, and drove back. When I walked in, Janice was nowhere in sight, so I went to the kitchen for another beer. "Oh, there you are, honey," Janice said, walking in. "I didn't hear you come in." "Hi, dear. Just got home. Long day," I replied with a loving smile, acting just like she did. "I didn't order dinner," she said with a little pout. I wanted to say she was busy with her boyfriend and gossiping with her sister, but I said, "That's okay, sweetie. I'll heat up leftovers from last night." Janice smiled and kissed my cheek. "I'm going to take a bath," she said. I smiled and nodded. "Sure, wash off all the traces of him." She left and I ate some leftover fried rice cold while downing 2 more beers. I threw away the container and sat in my recliner in the den. After flipping through channels, I settled on an old John Wayne movie. Half an hour later, Janice came down, sat on the couch, and left for bed after the movie. Yeah, tired from lying and cheating, I thought. I told her sweetly that I would watch the news and then come to bed. I didn't really watch the movie. My mind was busy planning my next steps. I knew I couldn't act until Monday morning, so I just had to get through the next few days. Saturday, I worked in the yard. Sunday, I played golf with a couple of good friends. I was going to miss them. Monday, I called my broker who managed my inheritance and told him to sell everything. Since I was in upper management, I could quickly cash in my retirement fund. I didn't care about the penalty. By Thursday, I was ready to leave. I went home to my wife and told her there was an emergency at work and I would be flying out the next day for a week. I packed 2 suitcases. That was all I needed. When we moved into our house, I stored everything important to me since it didn't fit her style. I didn't care about the rest of the stuff. She had chosen all the furniture, and I didn't like any of it. Luckily, we were renting the house, so I had no money tied up in it. I had sold my condo recently, and we were still looking for the right house to buy. When I say right, I mean what was right for her. So far, none of the houses we saw were right. Friday morning, I kissed my wife on the cheek one last time and carried my suitcases out the door. I loaded them into my Lexus and drove away without looking back. My first stop was at my friend Jake's place. I trusted him completely. He was shocked when I asked to trade my car for his older, rebuilt 4-wheel drive. I told him what I was doing. An hour later, I was heading west. I didn't think anyone would connect me to my new vehicle, and Jake promised to keep my old car hidden in his garage. For the next 4 days, I paid cash for everything. I had canceled all our credit cards and wasn't leaving a paper trail. Most of my money was safely in an offshore account, thanks to my broker. I could get the money transferred when needed. I hid enough cash in the SUV to last me for a while. The nights alone in motels were the hardest. For the last week, I had been too busy with my plan to think much about my personal life. I had loved Janice, or I wouldn't have married her. I played out different scenarios in my mind, but I decided there wasn't much I could have done differently. Even if I knew her old boyfriend was back, I don't think I could have kept them apart. I reached 2 conclusions. First, she never really loved me. I was just convenient. Second, I was stupid to marry her. Day 5, I was in a small town in Montana eating at a family diner. I wondered what my wife was doing. By now, she must have found out all her credit cards were canceled and our bank account was empty. My thoughts were interrupted by an older couple at the next table. They spoke quietly, but I could hear them. The man told his wife he wished he could hire help, but they couldn't afford it until their calves were ready for market, and even then, no one wanted to work for what they could pay. I guess the man was in his late 50s, with mostly gray hair that was probably dark once. His wife had striking red hair and bright blue eyes. I finished my meal and walked over to their table. "I'm sorry for listening in, but maybe I can help." The man looked me over. "I don't see how. If you hurt us, you know we can't pay you. How about I work for a place to stay?" His eyes narrowed. "Colleen, excuse us for a moment." He stood up and waited for me to follow. Outside, he turned to face me. He was my height, with broad shoulders and a fit build. His face showed lines from years of sun. His eyes were dark and sharp. "Who are you? Are you with the Wilsons?" I raised my hands. "Hold on. I don't know any Wilsons. 4 days ago, I was in Texas. I just got here today. I thought we could help each other." "If that's true, why would you help us? We can't pay. What's in it for you? If you're running from the law, we don't need that trouble." "I might be on the run, but not like you think," I said. I told him about my wife who wanted to take everything from me and that I needed a place to stay. "I haven't stolen or hurt anyone. I'm just trying to keep what's mine. I thought if you had a place for me to stay, I could work for you. I'll pay my own way. If I'm no good, just tell me and I'll leave with no hard feelings." He studied my face. "Son, if you're telling the truth, I'd be a fool not to give you a chance. But I have to tell you, the Wilsons want to buy my land. They haven't done anything bad yet, but I wouldn't put it past them. You might be taking on more than you can handle." I told him I was willing to take that risk. He asked if I'd ever worked on a ranch before. I told him the truth. I'd spent some summers at my uncle's place in Texas, but I wasn't a cowboy. He put out his hand, and we shook on it. He said his name was Bill, and I told him my name. We went back inside the diner where his wife was waiting. "Colleen, this is Carson Jones. He'll work for us if he can handle it," Bill said. Colleen stood up and shook my hand. "Nice to meet you, Carson," she said with a clear voice that had a slight Irish lilt. She, like Bill, was fit and trim and quite pretty. "Nice to meet you too, Mrs." I paused, realizing Bill hadn't given me his last name. "Buckman. Call me Colleen. We don't stand on ceremony around here." I immediately liked her. Bill said I could follow them to the ranch. Before we left town, he stopped at a general store and I followed him inside. "I thought you might need some clothes for ranch work," he said. "Yeah, what I have won't last long," I said, thankful for his thoughtfulness. Inside, the store owner greeted Bill warmly. It was clear Bill was a regular. About 40 minutes later, I had enough jeans, work shirts, a coat, and a pair of boots to get by for now. The drive to the ranch was about 25 miles to the main gate, which had Rocking Bee Ranch arched over it. It was another mile down a private road to the main house. The house was 2 stories, well kept and freshly painted. Behind it were a barn and several other buildings. Their pickup was half filled with groceries, likely their weekly supply run. I pulled up behind them, grabbed bags of groceries, and followed the Buckmans into the kitchen. 2 trips and the truck was unloaded. Bill told me to drive around back and he'd show me where to stay. I saw a small cabin where he stood waiting. When I got out, he pointed to the cabin and said it was mine, while another one nearby was Sam's, another worker. Sam was out making the rounds, and I'd meet him later. The cabin had 1 large room with a bed, a table with 2 chairs, a potbelly wood stove, and a small bathroom with a shower. It was simple, but clean and a good place to stay for now. I went back outside, and Bill was in his pickup. He told me to hop in. He drove me around the ranch. He had almost 6,000 acres. 5,000 were flat, good for grazing. A couple of 100 acres were used for growing winter feed. The back of the ranch was hilly and forested. A stream flowed from distant mountains through the property. He said you could only get there on horseback. Bill used to have 3 full-time hands, but now only Sam was left. Sam had been there for 30 years. During roundup, Bill hired extra help. It was 5 o'clock when he dropped me off at the cabin. "Oh, by the way," Bill said, "I saw you have a laptop. We've got a satellite connection so you can use the internet. Supper is at the main house at 6. It took me less than 30 minutes to unpack. I had time to start up my computer. As Bill said, I connected to the internet. I quickly checked my new email account. I had 1 email from Jake. He said Janice had reported me missing and the police were looking into it. That gave me something to think about. Jake was the only one I told I was leaving, and even he didn't know exactly where I was going. I mailed my resignation to my old job, but didn't tell them in person I was leaving. Just before 6, I went to the main house and knocked on the kitchen door. Bill called out for me to come in. Colleen was putting food on the table, and Bill was talking to a man I guessed was Sam. Bill waved me over. "Sam, this is Carson, the new hand I mentioned. At least for today. We'll see if he stays after working tomorrow," Bill said with a grin. "Carson, this is Sam." Sam gave me a big smile and shook my hand. He was a tall man, at least 6'3", and looked like he had worked hard all his life. He was African-American and appeared about the same age as Bill. "Well, young man, I hope you like it here. I could use the help," Sam said. At 28, I was about half his age, so he called me young. "I'll give it my best," I replied. Colleen then told us to sit down. Bill and Colleen sat at opposite ends of the table. Sam and I sat between them, across from each other. On the table was a platter of pork chops, a big bowl of mashed potatoes, and another with fresh green beans. There was a plate full of homemade cookies. "We don't do fancy food here, Carson," Colleen said. "But there's plenty, and it's good." I couldn't help but smile. "It looks great," I replied. The food was passed around, and our plates were soon full. It was delicious. Colleen could really cook. While we ate, I asked Bill if he'd always lived here. "Yep. My grandfather started this ranch and gave it to my father. Now, it's mine and Colleen's." Bill paused, looking thoughtful. "Though when I was younger, I wasn't sure she'd end up with me. I had to keep other guys away from her." Bill glanced at his wife, and I could see the love in his eyes. "Now, Bill, you know you were the only one for me. I just needed to know you felt the same," Colleen said. "My wife made 3 of my best days ever happen. The day she said she would marry me, our wedding day, and the day our daughter Caitlin was born," Bill said. I hadn't seen any sign of a daughter, and Colleen must have noticed my curious look. "Our daughter is studying right now. Caitlin's getting her doctorate in veterinary science at South Dakota State. She's only been able to come home for holidays, and we can't wait for her to return with her degree. She's coming home in a couple of months, Colleen explained. It'll be great to have a vet in the family. It should save us some money, Bill added with a grin. After dinner, I tried to help with the dishes, but Colleen said it was her job and shooed me away. Bill told me breakfast was at 5:30, and we started work at 6. As Sam and I were leaving, I saw a copy of today's New York Times on the counter. Bill must have picked it up in town. I asked if I could borrow the front page, and he said sure. When we got outside, I asked Sam to step into my cabin for a minute. Inside, I showed him my digital camera and asked him to take a picture of me holding the front page. I could tell he was curious, but he didn't ask why. He just asked if I had an alarm clock. I said I did. He told me he'd see me in the morning and left. I downloaded the picture to my computer and added it to an email. I sent it to the police in my old hometown, telling them I was alive and well and had left by choice. If I had used a local paper, it might have given away where I was. This way, they wouldn't know. I sent the email to Jake and told him to go to a local coffee shop with free internet. I figured my work email would still be active and gave him my password. This way, Jake could forward my message to the police without them tracking us. Hopefully, this would keep me off any missing persons lists. I didn't think they'd put much effort into finding a runaway husband anyway. I slept well that night. The next morning, I was up at 5. I showered and got ready to walk to the main house with Sam. Breakfast was eggs, sausage, hash browns, and toast. There was plenty for everyone. After we ate, Bill told Sam to put me to work replacing fence posts in the hilly area. I followed Sam to the barn. He showed me a horse and a saddle. He watched as I saddled the horse, seeming satisfied with my work. We loaded fence posts and a post-hole digger onto 2 mules. Bill brought a Winchester rifle and said it was mostly for putting down any injured cows we might find. We mounted our horses and led the mules up the creek into the hills. As we rode, Sam and I talked. I told him how I ended up in Montana. He told me about his past. He had married right out of high school but found his wife with another man. In anger, he almost beat the guy to death and served 5 years in prison. Bill was the only one who would hire him after that, and he's been here for 30 years. He thought highly of Bill and Colleen. They were good people. The sunrise was beautiful over the mountains. It was early April, and while the snow was gone in the lower areas, there was still some on the peaks. Once we reached the trees, the trail got steeper. After about half an hour, we reached the fence marking the property line. Sam said we only needed to replace the posts that were rotten, which was about every third one. He stayed with me for the first 2 to make sure I did it right. Sam told me to work until about 4, then head back to care for the horse and mules in time for dinner at 6. He said to follow the stream and I wouldn't get lost. Sam left, and I got to work. There was something calming about the forested hills. I replaced old posts with new ones, working steadily. At noon, I took a break and ate the pork chop sandwiches Colleen had given me that morning. They were left over from last night's meal and just as tasty. As I ate my lunch quietly, I watched a blue jay fly through the trees. A woodpecker stopped by and pecked at a tree for food. Soon, a white-tailed deer appeared from the other side of the fence. She moved closer until she smelled me. She snorted and ran back into the trees, her white tail waving like a flag. I finished my sandwiches and got back to work. My watch beeped at 4 that afternoon. I noticed I had set all but a couple of the posts the mules had carried up. I led the mules along the fence line until I found the stream and headed downhill. Just before leaving the trees, there was a natural pool where the stream flowed through. I stopped to enjoy the view. The upper stream dropped over a 10-foot ledge into the clear water below. It was the most beautiful and calm spot on the ranch. I got back to the barn in time to take the saddles off the animals and feed them. As I was working, Sam came in to settle his horse. When I told him I had set all but 2 of the posts, he seemed surprised and impressed. We had just enough time to wash up and change clothes before dinner. That night, we ate steaks. Bill looked impressed when Sam told him about the work I had done. I was really tired and didn't talk much during dinner. As soon as I could, I excused myself and went straight to bed. I slept deeply. The next morning, I was very sore. My hands, arms, shoulders, and legs hurt from using the post-hole digger. I thought I was in good shape because I worked out 4 or 5 times a week, but a 2-hour workout is not the same as a full day of setting fence posts. When I limped into the kitchen and winced as I sat down, Bill and Sam chuckled. Even Colleen tried to hide her smile. I was starving and ate a big breakfast. "Ready for another day of fencing?" Bill asked as we stood up from the table. I groaned. "Yes, sir," I said, trying to sound positive. Bill laughed again. "I think you can take a break today. I'd like you to ride with Sam." I nodded, feeling thankful. Our first job was to clean out the stalls and put in fresh hay. We put the horses and mules into the pasture and filled their feeder. Then we loaded up in the pickup truck to check on the cows. We wanted to make sure there were no sick cows or calves separated from their mothers. The tour Sam gave me was much longer than the one I went on with Bill my first day. Sam seemed to know right where the cattle would be. I guess after 30 years, it came naturally. At the far end of the ranch, Sam stopped the truck and looked around. He noticed something on one of the hills and used his binoculars. He handed them to me and pointed to where I should look. After a moment, I saw 2 calves alone. "Where are their mothers?" I asked. Sam pointed to 2 cows near the tree line. "Over there. The calves wandered up into the trees and got lost. We have to bring them down." "We're gonna hike up there?" I asked. "No, it's too far. We'll go back and get some horses." Sam called Bill on the 2-way radio and told him what we saw and that we were getting the horses. When we got back to the barn, Bill had already saddled 2 horses and loaded them into a trailer. We just had to hook up and go. Sam drove us close to the tree line below where the calves were, and we unloaded the horses and rode up into the hills. Sam's 30 years of experience showed. He knew this land very well. Half an hour later, we were behind the calves and slowly pushed them down the hills. I laughed when we cleared the trees and the calves saw their mothers. They ran to their moms, who let them feed. I couldn't help but think that if I had run away from my mom, I would have gotten a scolding instead of a warm welcome. That night, we had fried chicken, corn on the cob, and mashed potatoes for supper. The chicken was cooked perfectly, and I had more energy and talked more than the night before. I learned more about Colleen. Her parents had moved to the United States from Ireland when she was 5. Her father loved stories of the Old West and came to Montana. That explained the hint of an Irish accent in her speech. I felt much better the next day. After breakfast, I went back to replace more fence posts. Sam helped me load the mules, but I went out alone. All I had to do was follow the stream. That day was easier than the first. I had learned some tricks that made the work less tiring. By 4 o'clock, I had set the last post and headed back to the barn. I even had time to clean some of the stalls before washing up for dinner. On my 4th day, I helped Sam fix some buildings. The day after, I set more fence posts. The next 2 months flew by. I was now in great shape. We had a schedule where Sam took Saturdays off, Bill took Sundays off, and Monday was my day off. I spent the day doing my laundry and went into town if I needed anything. I had come to really like everyone at the ranch. Sam was good-natured and easy to talk to. We often chatted after dinner. I respected Bill a lot. He was honest and hard-working, and we got along well. Colleen was very kind to Sam and me, but I sensed she had some spirit in her. She and Bill made a great couple. Colleen and Bill were excited now. Over breakfast on Friday, Colleen told me her daughter would be coming home in a week. That day, it was my job to take a horse and ride through the wooded area to check for any cattle that might have wandered into the hills. A little after 4, I reached a stream and followed it down. When I arrived at the pool below the waterfall, I stopped and got off my horse. I took off my shirt and knelt beside the water, dipping my bandana in to wash the sweat and dust from my face and neck. I heard a horse whinny from downstream and looked to my right. A rider was approaching. At first, I thought it was Colleen, but I quickly realized it was a younger version of her. This beautiful woman could only be Caitlin. She had the same bright blue eyes and red hair as her mother. She rode up and stopped a few feet from me as I stood up. She looked me over, her eyes stopping on my bare chest, which showed the muscles from 2 months of hard work. "Who are you, and what are you doing on this property?" she asked sharply. "Name's Carson, and I work here," I replied. "I don't believe you." "My dad said he couldn't afford to pay another worker," she said. Even though she was beautiful, her unfriendly tone was annoying me. "Yeah, I heard that too. Maybe that's why I laugh all the way to the bank every payday." Caitlin glared at me, turned her horse around, and rode away. Chuckling to myself, I put my shirt back on, got back on my horse, and headed towards the barn. Later, I found out there had been a mix-up between Caitlin and her parents. They thought she was coming home next week, but she had actually arrived a few hours after I had ridden out. She spent the morning and early afternoon with her parents before telling them she wanted to go for a ride, something she loved but didn't have time for at school. So she saddled up and rode to her favorite spot, the waterfall and pool. I guess after 2 months I was old news and Bill and Colleen had forgotten to mention me. Just as I turned the corner of the barn, I saw the back of her red head disappear inside. I got down and led my horse in. Caitlin was looking for her father and finally found him in the barn. I heard her loud voice clearly. "Who is that man up at the waterfall?" she demanded. Bill thought for a moment. "That must have been Carson," he answered. "He said he works here, but last time I was here, you said you couldn't afford to pay another worker." "Well, he's right, he does work here. As to what he gets paid, I don't think that's your business. I still own this ranch, young lady." "Daddy, he says you pay him so much he laughs all the way to the bank," she sputtered. I had entered the barn by then. Caitlin had her back to me and didn't see me. Bill did and gave me a grin. "Is that true, Carson? If you think you're overpaid, I can fix that," he said to me. Caitlin spun around and glared at me. I took my hat off with one hand and scratched my head with the other. "Well, I'd hate to take advantage of you, Bill. Just how much are you thinking of cutting my wages?" I asked. Bill and I both started laughing. Caitlin now glared at both of us, not seeing the humor. "Sweetheart, to clear things up, Carson stays in the cabin next to Sam's," Bill said. "And what else?" she still demanded to know. "That, and he gets to eat your mother's fine cooking." "So you're saying you don't pay him? Why would he work for nothing?" Caitlin persisted. "He has his reasons, and it's not my place to tell you," Bill said. "Working to have a chance to taste your mother's cooking is worth a lot." "I don't think she would like to hear you say it's nothing," I added. Caitlin shot me one more glare and stormed out of the barn. Bill shook his head. "She reminds me so much of her mother when she was young. I didn't think I'd ever tame Colleen." At dinner that night, Caitlin joined us. She sat next to Sam across from me. She gave me another sharp look when I entered the kitchen. I waited until everyone had filled their plates before speaking. "Your mother tells me you've finished your doctorate in veterinary medicine," I said in a friendly voice. "Yeah," was her one-word answer, given without looking up. "Sam says there's only one other vet in the area, and he's over 50 miles away. I'm sure you'll be a big help to the folks here." Caitlin glanced up at my compliment, and I thought I saw her eyes soften a bit. "Yes, that would be Dr. Harrison," Colleen said. "He has more work than he can handle and is often needed in many places at once. I agree with you, Carson. Our Caitlin will be a great help." During the rest of the meal, Caitlin talked with her parents and Sam, who had been on the ranch since before she was born. She didn't speak to me directly, and I mostly stayed quiet. This was her homecoming, and I knew her parents and Sam wanted to hear all about her life while she was away. As soon as I finished eating, I excused myself and went to bed. I went back to my cabin and checked my email. I saw a message from Jake. He mentioned that he had spoken with a friend of his who works with the police. Jake's friend said they no longer considered me a missing person after they got the email with the picture I had sent. About Janice, Brandon left her as soon as he found out I had disappeared with all the money. It seemed Janice wouldn't be getting any of it anytime soon. She couldn't pay the rent for the house we had lived in. Now she lived in a cheap apartment and worked as a waitress. She didn't have enough money to hire a lawyer to go after me. I found it ironic. Janice had married me for my money, and her boyfriend wanted her for the same reason, my money. I was still replacing fence posts. I only did it every third or fourth day now. I moved out of the hill area and could drive the pickup truck to my work spot. It was easier to load the posts in the truck than on the mules. The morning after Caitlin came back home, I loaded the pickup with posts and drove to where I last worked. When it was time for lunch, I realized I hadn't brought my lunch. Usually, Colleen made sure we had lunch if we were working far from the main house, but I forgot to grab mine. I could have gone back to get it, but I decided skipping one meal wouldn't hurt. About half an hour later, I had just set a post and was tying the wire when I heard a vehicle coming. I looked back and saw one of the ranch trucks. It stopped just as I finished. To my surprise, Caitlin got out with a small sack in her hand, like the ones Colleen used for our lunches. "Mama said you forgot your lunch," she said, handing the bag to me. I took it from her. "Thank you, Caitlin." That was very kind of you, I replied. I looked in the bag and saw 2 sandwiches. I took one out and offered the other to Caitlin, but she shook her head no. I shrugged and sat on the tailgate of the truck to eat. Caitlin stood about 5 feet away staring at me. I just sat and ate, looking straight ahead. "Why are you here?" she finally asked. I looked at her and decided to joke around a bit. "You can't tell anyone. I robbed a bank and hid the money. I'm staying here until things cool down, then I'll get the cash." At first, her eyes grew wide, then she glared at me. "You're a real clown," she said, and turned to leave. I waited until she was halfway to her truck. "Caitlin," I called out. She stopped and turned around slowly. "I married a woman who never loved me. She only wanted what I could give her. I'm here because I needed a break from everything." Caitlin stared at me again. I think she decided I was being honest this time. She nodded and left without another word. As she drove away, I thought about what her dad had said about her mom being like Caitlin at that age. He said he had tamed Colleen, but I thought it was their love for each other that was the real secret. I'd only known Caitlin for less than a day, and I couldn't imagine any man taming her fiery spirit. Dinner that night was much like the night before. Caitlin talked with her parents and Sam. I didn't feel left out because she didn't know me and we had nothing in common. We were just finishing dinner when there was a knock on the door. Bill went to answer it and came back with a man about my age. He was what women might call tall, dark, and handsome. Caitlin called his name and jumped from her seat to hug him. They obviously knew each other and chatted excitedly. A few minutes later, there was another knock on the door. Bill answered it, and this time brought in another man, this one fair-haired, but also good-looking. Caitlin greeted him just as warmly. I remembered Bill's words about having to fight off many men to win his wife. Caitlin was just as much a prize as her mother, at least in looks. I excused myself and went back to my cabin. Mentally, I wished the 2 men luck. If Caitlin turned out to be like her mother, whoever won her heart would be a lucky man. The next day, I took the pickup and rode around the ranch. By the end of my rounds, something didn't seem right. There were enough cattle, but it felt like we were short a few. It was still early, so I went back and got Sam. We did a quick check of the ranch. We both felt something was off. We decided to ride through the hilly areas the next day. We talked to Bill about it at supper, and he agreed. It rained that night, which would make it harder to find tracks. The next morning, we loaded our horses into a trailer, and Bill drove us to one end of the ranch. I rode partway up the hill, and Sam went higher. We headed across the ranch, through hills and trees. By late afternoon, we reached the other side and found 5 stray cattle. Bill met us there, and we loaded the horses into the trailer and headed back. We talked about the problem and decided we had to keep a closer watch. At dinner that night, Caitlin had another visitor. Her mom whispered that it was the 3rd one that day. Word had spread that Caitlin was back, and guys were lining up to see her. The next 4 days, we spent a lot of time watching the cattle. Everything seemed okay except for the one missing cow. Caitlin kept getting visitors. She had been home for a week and hadn't spoken to me since she brought me lunch. On the 5th day after the cow went missing, I told Bill I wanted to check the property line in the hills. We had already checked all the fences along the pastures and found no sign of the missing cow. Sam dropped me off on the west side of the ranch, near where Bill's land met the Wilson Ranch. About halfway to the southwest corner, I saw 3 fresh sets of horse tracks. They crossed from the Wilson side onto Bill's side. The odd thing was that the fence was still up. I got off my horse and checked the fence posts. The staples had been loosened on 5 posts, so the wire was just hanging there. You could push the wire down to cross and then put it back up to look normal. I got back on my horse and followed the tracks. Near the stream, I saw 3 horses tied to a tree, a little above the waterfall. I tied my horse to a tree and took out my rifle. Moving quietly through the trees, I kept looking around. When I got to the horses, I saw boot prints leading downstream. I snuck to the edge of the waterfall and peeked over. I gasped. There was Caitlin in the water. She was swimming and she was naked. A movement in the trees snapped me out of it. I saw 1 man on the right and 2 more near the pond on the left. I raised my rifle and shot. The bullet hit the ground between the feet of the man on the right. Another quick shot hit between the feet of the two men on the left. Caitlin screamed. I stood up so everyone could see me. "Get on the ground now. I won't miss the next time," I shouted. "Caitlin, stay where you are." Caitlin hadn't seen the men. She just saw me standing there with a rifle. "Are you crazy, Carson?" she screamed. She was trying to cover herself with her arms. One of the men on the left started to move like he was going to run. I shot the tree right next to him. He dropped to the ground. Caitlin looked and saw the men. She screamed again. "On your stomachs now. 3, 2. Before I said 1, the other 2 dropped down. "Now put your faces in the dirt and your hands behind your heads." They did as I said. "Now get out, Caitlin, and get dressed." "But Carson," she started to argue. "Just do what I tell you, Caitlin. Get dressed and get out of here," I barked at her. Caitlin was clearly scared, but she did as I said. She walked out of the pool. Even though she kept her back to me, I couldn't stop looking at her. She quickly put on her jeans and shirt and got on her horse. One kick and she was gone through the trees. With Caitlin gone, I told the men one at a time to come up the rise and lie down again. When all 3 were in front of me, I felt a bit of relief. I decided to bluff. "Now what should I do with you 3? I paused. "Maybe I could shoot you and let you bleed out." The men started to beg for their lives. The smell of fear was in the air. "Even if I don't kill you, Caitlin's father will when he finds out you were going to harm his daughter. Unless you have something important to confess to the sheriff, like cattle rustling. It might get you jail time, but at least you'd be alive." The smallest of the 3 spoke up. "Yes, we did it. Wilson said if he could ruin Buckman, he could take his land." One of the others told him to be quiet. "I'm not dying over some cows," the small guy shot back. I knew Caitlin would ride fast to find her father, and he would come to see what had happened. While waiting, I kept watch over the men. About 45 minutes later, Bill and Sam rode up. I waved, and they came up to the waterfall. "What is going on?" Bill demanded from his horse. He looked down at the men lying on the ground. Some of Wilson's men decided to visit. I followed their tracks from the fence to here. Caitlin was swimming, and these 3 were sneaking up on her. I walked over to the prisoners and pushed my rifle barrel into the small guy's neck. "I think this one here has something he wants to tell you," I said, nudging the guy next to me. He finally spoke up. "We did it! We took your cattle! But it was Wilson who made us do it!" he cried. Bill pushed his hat back and smiled. "You know, when my grandfather started this ranch, they used to hang horse thieves and cattle rustlers. That was justice then. It's a pity we have to act civilized now." Sam watched our unexpected guests while Bill and I had a quiet talk. We decided to take them back to the ranch. Bill and I walked behind them with our rifles, making sure they behaved. Sam tied their horses together and followed. When we reached the barn, we put them in separate stalls where they could sit but couldn't see each other. Bill went inside to call the sheriff while Sam and I stood guard. The sheriff arrived less than half an hour later, speeding up the long driveway. Bill and I met him outside and explained what had happened. I suggested we let the sheriff talk to the smaller guy first. The sheriff agreed, and soon enough I had the prisoner outside, smelling like he'd soiled himself. He seemed scared and didn't want to talk at first. "Seems to me, Bill, this is just a case of trespassing. It's a waste of my time. I guess I can leave them here and let you deal with it," the sheriff said. The little rustler's eyes went wide with fear, and he quickly started talking. The sheriff got the full story and called for backup. Soon, a line of sheriff vehicles was heading to Wilson's ranch. They found nearly 100 cattle with our Rocking Bee brand. By the end of the day, Wilson and his men were behind bars. It was past 9 by the time we sat down for supper. Caitlin, Bill's daughter, kept her eyes on her plate. "What were you doing up there?" Bill asked her. "I was just swimming. I didn't think anyone would come and watch me," she said, glaring at me. "I wasn't spying on you," I said. "I followed the horse's tracks to the stream, and who knows what could have happened to you if I hadn't been there. I don't think those guys had good plans seeing you swimming there." Caitlin's face turned bright red. "Thank God you got there when you did, Carson," Colleen, Bill's wife, said. "I hate to think what could have happened." We quickly finished eating. We had to be up early the next day. As I headed to my cabin, Caitlin called out to me. "So, did you like what you saw today?" she snapped. I was hoping she'd be grateful. "I'd be lying if I said the view wasn't nice," I replied. She let out a huff and stormed off. I just shook my head, thinking maybe there's something about me that annoys her. The next day, Bill went to town to press charges against Wilson. We had to wait a few days before we could bring back the stolen cattle because the prosecutor needed to record everything first. Sam and I spent the day painting some of the outbuildings. Caitlin didn't join us for lunch, which was fine by me. Bill got back in the afternoon but waited until dinner to tell us what happened. Wilson and his men would be out on bail since this wasn't a major crime. Bill didn't think they'd cause more trouble but told us to stay alert. He looked at Caitlin and grinned. "If you plan on swimming again, maybe you should take Carson along. To watch out for you," he said, laughing. Caitlin's face turned red and she stormed off. Bill and Sam laughed loudly and even Colleen giggled. I couldn't help but chuckle too. When we calmed down, Bill thanked me for my help. "You're worth every penny I pay you," he said, and we all laughed. 3 days later, Bill got the word we could take back the cattle. We loaded 3 horses into a trailer and drove to Wilson's ranch. We were escorted by the sheriff to the stolen cattle. Colleen came to drive the truck and trailer back after we unloaded the horses. Bill, Sam, and I started herding the cattle back to our ranch. I felt like I was in an old Western movie. When we got close, I rode ahead and cut the fence so the cattle could cross over. Once all the cattle were back, we fixed the fence and headed to the main house, feeling proud of our work. Caitlin had applied for her vet license. Since it normally took about 45 days to get approved, she spent her time taking care of her father's animals on the ranch. I would see her around sometimes, especially at mealtimes. She still ignored me, but if I caught her eye, I'd give her a big smile and wiggle my eyebrows. This always made her blush. 2 weeks after the waterfall incident, we ended up in the barn at the same time. "Been swimming lately?" I said, wiggling my eyebrows. Caitlin walked over, stood very close to me, and glared. "Why are you such a jerk?" she snapped. I shrugged and smiled. "Why are you so mean?" I shot back. Her right hand started to swing up to slap me, but I grabbed her wrist quickly. She tried with her left hand, but I caught that one too. I pushed both hands behind her back, pinning them. This made her press against me. Slowly, I brought my face close to hers and stopped when my lips were just an inch away. Caitlin watched me with wide eyes but didn't pull away. "If you were my girl, I'd put you over my knee and teach you a lesson," I whispered. Caitlin gasped. "You wouldn't dare," she said, trying to pull away. I suddenly let go of her and she fell back, landing on her bottom. "It's not that I wouldn't dare. I just got rid of one woman who didn't care about me, and I'm not wasting time on another one." This time, it was my turn to walk off. I left the barn with her sitting on the ground in surprise. I didn't see her again until supper. She didn't talk to me, but kept glancing at me with a look I couldn't figure out. Not that I ever understood women much, as my marriage to Janice proved. The next day, I was in the barn cleaning the stalls when Bill came in. Being Sunday, his day off, I figured he wanted to talk. I wondered if Caitlin had told him what happened and if he was here to ask me to leave. I stopped my work as he approached. "I hear you and Caitlin had a little showdown yesterday," he said. So, she had told him. But there was a twinkle in Bill's eye. "Yeah, you could say that. It was probably all my fault," I admitted. "Maybe, maybe not. She can't figure you out. She thought you were here for something. Then you saved her in the ranch. She's wondering why you don't chase her like the other young men. Just like her mother, Caitlin is used to boys being smitten with her. She's had some boyfriends, but they never lasted. I don't think she respected them. I just hope you don't let her scare you off. You're welcome here as long as you want." "Thanks, Bill. That means a lot. As for Caitlin, I'll stop teasing her. Maybe we can just live peacefully," I said. Bill left and I got back to work. I had the rest of the day to think about what he said. If Caitlin wanted to understand me, she should just talk to me. Chasing her like the others? That wasn't going to happen. Caitlin didn't come to supper that night, but no one mentioned it and I didn't ask. The next day, I got up at 5 as usual, even on my day off. I preferred sticking to the same schedule. After breakfast, when Sam and Bill left for work, I did my laundry. Bill had bought a big washer and dryer so I could do all my clothes in one load. While my clothes washed, I sat in the kitchen drinking coffee. Colleen and I were chatting when Caitlin came in. She rarely had breakfast with us and ate later. "Got any plans for today?" Colleen asked me. I was thinking of driving into town. "Do you need anything?" I asked. There are a couple of things you could get for me if you don't mind, Colleen said. No problem at all, I replied. Can I ride into town with you? Caitlin asked. I looked up, surprised. I need to go to the store, and it seems silly for both of us to drive, she explained. Sure, I'll give you a lift, I replied, still surprised. After yesterday, I didn't expect her to talk to me, let alone ride with me. I'll be leaving in about an hour and a half after my laundry is done and put away. Okay, I'll be ready, Caitlin said. She finished fixing herself something to eat and sat quietly while Colleen and I talked. As soon as I stepped out of my cabin, Caitlin came out the back door. She looked lovely in a turquoise sundress that matched her red hair. The straps left her arms and shoulders bare. Her skin was smooth and without freckles. She moved gracefully toward me, her blue eyes locked on mine. I was sure she wanted me to watch her. I held the passenger door open for her and watched her slide in. We started driving, and for the first half of the trip, she watched the countryside in silence. I thought you were going to kiss me yesterday, she said suddenly. I glanced at her, but she seemed to be looking out the side window. Well, while that might not have been bad, I have a rule about not making unwanted moves on women who aren't interested. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her head turn, and I could tell she was looking at me. Caitlin stayed quiet, but kept glancing over at me. I pulled into the general store, and we went inside. I needed a couple of new pairs of jeans and shirts. Caitlin had a list of things her mom wanted, and an hour later, we had everything loaded. I had one more stop at the hardware store for Bill, but it was lunchtime and I was hungry. I suggested we grab a bite to eat, and Caitlin agreed. I pulled into the same diner where I first met Bill and Colleen. We took a table and ordered our food. We sat in silence again, and I started to think I should have just gone to the hardware store and then straight back to the ranch. Just then, the door opened and 3 men walked in. I recognized 2 of them as guys who had shown interest in Caitlin. They walked straight to our table and took the seats on either side while the third stood behind me. They ignored me and started talking to Caitlin. I stood up and told the third one to sit down. I saw Caitlin's glare as I moved to the next table. When the waitress brought our food, I motioned for her to put mine in front of me. I ate quickly, ignoring the conversation at Caitlin's table. I tossed some money on the table to pay for our meals and stood up. Caitlin had barely touched her food. I'm going to the hardware store. I can come back later if you're ready to go, I said, interrupting their conversation. Caitlin pushed her plate back and stood up. No, I'll go with you. It was nice seeing you guys, but we have to run, she said. The guys tried to protest, offering her a ride home. She just told them no and followed me out to my SUV. I drove to the hardware store and got out. She stayed in the car, looking upset. She stayed that way as we drove back to the ranch and turned off the highway onto the mile-long driveway. Why did you do that? She asked. Do what? I replied, unsure of what she meant. Get up and sit at the other table. Oh, that! I thought you'd rather spend time with your friends, and I didn't want to be in the middle of their competition for your attention. You really are a jerk, she snapped. I wisely kept quiet, not wanting to argue while driving. I pulled up to the main house. As soon as I opened the back of the SUV, Caitlin grabbed what she could carry. I picked up more bags and followed her into the house. Just as I walked in, she was dumping everything on the kitchen table, and without a word to her mother, she strode out of the room. Colleen looked at me, questioning. I shrugged and said, I guess I'm a jerk. Colleen giggled and came over, putting a hand on my arm. I've never seen anyone impact Caitlin the way you do, she said quietly. I guess I was born to make her mad, I replied. I'm not so sure about that, she said, leaving me confused. I went back to my cabin and put away my new clothes. Not wanting to stay cooped up, I went to the barn and saddled a horse. I rode out and ended up at the top of the waterfall. It was a nice day, so I tied the horse to a tree and sat at the edge, looking down at the clear pool. I had been sitting there for half an hour, maybe longer, when Caitlin rode up below me. She got off her horse. Not wanting her to think I was spying, I picked up a stone and tossed it down, creating a splash in the water. Caitlin looked around and spotted me. I expected her to ride away, but instead, she mounted her horse and rode up to where I was sitting. She tied her horse next to mine and walked towards me. I stood up and stepped away from the edge, just in case she was planning on pushing me off. You're a jerk, she said when she stopped right in front of me. And you're still mean, I replied. This time I didn't wait for her slap. I grabbed her around the waist and kissed her. Just as quickly, I let her go and tried to move towards my horse. Her hand grabbed my arm and turned me around. I was shocked when she pulled me into another kiss. Our tongues danced together, and we were both breathless when we pulled apart. Caitlin looked at me with soft eyes. "Jerk," she said. "Mean," I replied. Again, we kissed. "Am I really mean?" she asked softly. I chuckled. "You definitely have your moments." "I'm sorry," she replied quietly. I stared at her and wondered if I had really gotten through to her. I thought of Bill and Colleen and the love they shared. I had quick thoughts about living a life with Caitlin. "Let's go for a swim," Caitlin whispered. I nodded. We gathered our clothes and, still naked, led our horses to the pool. I watched her as she walked into the cool water. We waded in up to our chests. Caitlin moved into my arms, wrapped her legs around my waist, and we kissed deeply. We held each other as the water kept us afloat. Caitlin rested her head on my shoulder until the cold water made us get out. We dressed, got back on our horses, and rode back. After putting the horses away, Caitlin wrapped her arms around my neck and kissed me again. Without speaking, she walked to the main house. I headed to my cabin, took a shower, and wondered about my feelings for Caitlin. I realized I cared for her more than I had known. There was just enough time to dress for supper. When I joined Bill, Colleen, and Sam in the kitchen, I noticed Caitlin wasn't there. Just as we sat down, she walked in and took the chair next to mine instead of her usual seat by Sam. Bill and Colleen gave her curious looks, but Caitlin just smiled. During dinner, Caitlin chatted happily. Her parents didn't ask why she was so cheerful. After supper, Caitlin helped her mother clean up while Sam and I returned to our cabins. Once in bed, I heard a soft knock on my door. Caitlin slipped inside and into my arms. We kissed softly and lay in bed together, falling asleep in each other's arms. At 5 a.m., my alarm went off. Caitlin, still snuggled against me, groaned at the sound. With some effort, I got out of bed, dressed for the day, and kissed Caitlin's head before slipping out of the cabin. Over breakfast, Bill and Colleen gave me curious looks, hinting they might know where Caitlin had spent the night. After breakfast, I loaded the pickup for another day of setting fence posts. Working alone on the ranch gave me time to think. I reflected on my old life, realizing it had only been 3 months since I left my wife, yet it felt like a lifetime ago. I thought about Bill, Colleen, Sam, and how much they meant to me. And then I thought about Caitlin and what we shared the day before. At lunchtime, I realized I had forgotten my lunch again. Just then, I heard a pickup speeding towards me. Caitlin jumped out, running to me with a bag in her hand. She kissed me passionately and said, "Mama said you forgot your lunch." We kissed again, forgetting about lunch. That day, I didn't set as many fence posts, but I felt closer to Caitlin. We also talked a lot. I told Caitlin about my past and how my ex-wife treated me. Caitlin shared her fear that I would leave. "Caitlin, the only way I will leave is if you tell me to go," I reassured her. Caitlin returned home, and I finished my day. After a shower, I joined the family for dinner. Caitlin sat next to me again. During the meal, there was a knock on the door. Bill answered it, and a man who had called on Caitlin before walked in. "I was wondering if you would like to go for a drive," he asked Caitlin. "Thanks for the offer," Caitlin said, "but I don't think my boyfriend would like it." She kissed my cheek. The man nodded, looking embarrassed, and left. It was clear now. I saw smiles from Bill, Colleen, and Sam. We were an official couple. Soon, local men stopped trying to call on Caitlin. She made it known she was not available. I found a way to help Caitlin with her dream. She wanted to start a veterinary business but needed a loan. The bank wouldn't give her an unsecured loan, and she didn't want her father to risk the ranch. I told her to give me a couple of days. I contacted my offshore bank and arranged for an account under a fake loan company name. I had Caitlin fill out a loan application on my computer and send it online. I set it up so it would come to my email. After a few days, I sent her a message saying her loan was approved and the money would soon be in her account. Caitlin was very happy but wondered why the loan had such a low interest rate of only 2%. I told her it came from a non-profit group that offered loans to those serving the community. I could have given her the money outright, but I knew she was too proud to accept it that way. She had worked hard for her degree and wanted to succeed on her own. Once her license was approved, Caitlin bought a new van and turned it into a mobile vet office with all the needed medical tools. Soon, local ranchers heard about her, and she started getting a lot of calls for her services. Caitlin often stayed with me in my cabin. Bill and Colleen knew but didn't mind. She was 27 and fully capable of making her own choices. 3 months later, Wilson and his men went to trial. It was an easy case. The small guy testified against them and got 2 years probation. 5 other men got 5 years each in prison. Wilson, the leader, got 10 years and a $50,000 fine. After Wilson went to prison, I looked into his ranch. He had no family nearby, and with his workers in jail, no one was left to run it. I came up with a new plan, but first, I needed to end old business. I had to get a divorce without letting Janice get half my money. I asked my friend Jake for help. I called him and asked him to talk to Janice. He told her that I wanted to offer a settlement for a divorce, $50,000. If she didn't accept, she'd get nothing from me ever. At first, she played dumb and asked why I left and wouldn't come back. Jake told her I knew all about her and her boyfriend Brandon and her plan to divorce me. Her act dropped, and since she was struggling as a waitress, she agreed to my offer. I went back to Texas to get a lawyer to draft the papers. Caitlin wasn't happy I was leaving. I explained it was necessary and promised to come back. She insisted on driving me to the airport and picking me up when I returned. She felt better knowing I was leaving my SUV and most of my things behind. I left on Sunday, and Jake picked me up at the airport. I stayed with him, his wife, and their 2 kids. I called Caitlin every night. By Friday, the paperwork was done. Jake took Janice to my lawyer. She'd get $10,000 now and the rest in 60 days once the divorce was final. She saw the check and signed the papers. My lawyer gave her the $10,000 check. I never had to see her. I thought about the things I had in storage, like keepsakes and yearbooks. I decided to get them all at once, so I rented a moving van. Caitlin was worried when I told her I wasn't flying back. I calmed her down, explaining I was bringing everything important to me. She got excited that I was coming back for good. It took 3 days of hard driving to cover the 1,600 miles. I arrived at the Rocking Bee Ranch on Tuesday evening and got a warm welcome from everyone. That night, Caitlin and I spent time together until early morning. I was ready to start my new plan. I visited Wilson in prison to buy his ranch. At first, he refused. I explained he'd be in prison for at least 7 years. His place would fall apart, and his cattle would die without anyone to look after them. Ranchers wouldn't accept him back after his crime. Realizing this, he agreed to sell. Next, I needed financing. I was sure Janice wouldn't mess up her $40,000. I negotiated with Wilson for a price of $5 million. The ranch was worth more, so getting a loan was easy. I put down $500,000 and financed the rest. In a month, everything was set. I kept my plan secret. I told Caitlin and Bill that I had personal business with my money to deal with. I spent just 1 or 2 days each week on this new project. I registered the land and set up a business to manage it. Summer had ended and fall was here. I hired someone to harvest the hay on the land and 4 workers to live on the property and run things for now. The most experienced worker was made temporary boss. I told him I would be away often, even though I lived nearby. He could always call me, and I would visit the ranch often. I also decided to remodel the main house, which had 2 stories and 5 bedrooms, but needed modern touches. Caitlin was growing frustrated with me because I wouldn't explain where I was going when I left. Despite this, our relationship grew stronger. I fell more in love with her each day, and I felt she loved me the same way. Her job as a vet was going well, and she was happy, even though it kept her on the road. One day, almost ready to reveal my plans, Caitlin stopped me after I returned from checking on the remodel. "What is going on, Carson? Are you seeing someone else?" she demanded. "No, absolutely not. There is no one else," I said. "I have some things to take care of, but please believe I will tell you everything soon. I love you, Caitlin. Trust me. Trust in our love." She looked at me, searching for the truth. Her eyes softened. "Okay, Carson, I trust you. But you better tell me what's happening soon, or else," she cautioned. I kissed her deeply, showing all my love. Spring came, marking the start of calving season and the completion of the house renovations. It was time for the final part of my plan. One afternoon, I asked Caitlin to go for a drive with me. "I've been thinking it's time for me to leave the Rocking Bee Ranch," I said with a serious face. Her eyes filled with tears immediately. "But Carson, you promised you wouldn't leave," she said, her voice shaking. "We were at the entrance of the former Flying W ranch. There was no sign over the gates yet. I turned in and drove down the private road." "I didn't plan on going far," I said. Caitlin looked around, confused. "Carson, what are we doing on Wilson's land?" I didn't answer until we pulled up to the main house. "Come on, I want to show you something." I opened her door and took her hand, leading her to the front door and inside. "Carson," she whispered, "what are you doing? We could get in trouble for this." "Relax, honey. Wilson doesn't own this ranch anymore. Let's look around. I want to know what you think of the house." Caitlin stared at me, shook her head, but let me lead her around. We walked through the upstairs bedrooms and back downstairs, where there was a large living room, a wood-paneled den, and 2 rooms set up as home offices. The kitchen looked brand new, and I could see that Caitlin loved it. The only room with furniture was the one I planned to use for my office. The rest of the house was empty, ready for her to choose what she wanted. "What do you think of the house?" I asked. "It's really nice," she said. "Could you live here?" "Carson, what's going on?" Caitlin was clearly confused and upset. I got down on one knee and took her hand. "Caitlin, Wilson no longer owns this ranch." "I do. I'm asking if you could live here as my wife." "You own this?" she asked, her eyes wide. I nodded and pulled out an engagement ring. "Caitlin, I love you with all my heart. Will you marry me?" Her eyes filled with tears, and she looked like she might cry. Then she jumped on me, covering my face with kisses. "Yes, Carson. Yes, I'll marry you," she shouted. We kissed again, filled with happiness. She held out her hand for the ring. Caitlin looked around the house with new excitement, running from room to room. I waited patiently until she came running back into my arms. "The house is beautiful. I love it," she said with joy. I then showed her the 2 offices. "One for you to run your business from and one for me," I said. This earned me another long kiss. I then drew her attention to a large piece of paper with a drawing of a gate that said Double C Ranch. "What is the Double C?" she asked. "It stands for Carson and Caitlin Ranch," I said. Her face lit up. "That's perfect," she cried out. In the days that followed, we continued to enjoy our new home. Finally, it was time to share the good news with her family. We drove back to the house, arriving a bit after 6. Her parents, Bill and Colleen, and her brother Sam were in the kitchen. Caitlin and I walked in together, and she held up her left hand. "We're getting married," she announced. Colleen ran to hug Caitlin, while Bill and Sam congratulated me with firm handshakes and pats on the back. I got a big hug from my future mother-in-law, while Caitlin hugged her dad and Sam. When things calmed down, we all sat to eat. Caitlin waited until everyone was eating. "This means we will be moving," she said casually. "What?" Bill, Colleen, and Sam exclaimed together. "Tell them, sweetheart," Caitlin said to me. I nodded. "Well, Bill, you know how Wilson wanted to combine his ranch with yours? I think it's a good idea," I said. Bill stood up, looking angry. "No way the Flying W is getting my ranch," he shouted. I laughed. "Bill, calm down. It's not the Flying W anymore. It's the Double C Ranch, and we own it now." "What do you mean?" he asked, confused. "I bought Wilson's ranch. It belongs to Caitlin and me now," I explained. "Double C, Carson, and Caitlin," Colleen said. She got it right away. "Bill, I thought if we combined the 2 ranches, you could run them. We would split the profits 50-50, I added. "But the Double C is more than twice the size of my ranch. It makes more money," he said. "Bill, you have been doing this all your life. I need your help. I want us to be equal partners. You would be in charge. What you say goes. Besides, Caitlin owns part of it too. It keeps everything in the family," I explained. Bill sat down and looked at Colleen. She nodded. Bill reached out his hand and we shook on it. "Carson, this will take getting used to, but I accept your offer." "This means we need more hands and Sam will be the head foreman," I said. Then I groaned. "And now I have to remove all those fence posts I set on that side of the property." Everyone laughed at me. Dinner was a loud and happy celebration. Caitlin stayed in my cabin and we were late for breakfast the next morning. Everyone was still in the kitchen waiting for us to eat so we could all drive over to the Double C and Caitlin could show her new house. Everyone was impressed, and I saw Colleen look at the kitchen with envy. It took Caitlin and her mother a month to furnish the house. It was ready to move into on our wedding night. We were married at the Double C. Bill and his family were respected, and ranchers and their families from miles around came to celebrate. As Caitlin's husband and Bill's son-in-law, I was welcomed into their community. It was late when we got to bed, and we stayed there until late the next day. On our third day of marriage, I took my bride to Fiji for a tropical honeymoon. Our first roundup that year paid off well, and we sent many cattle to market. We made a good profit. Most of mine went to pay off the loan, but with Caitlin's business, we were doing well. We even built a new house for Sam, and he now has a girlfriend from town. We might have another wedding soon. Another year has passed, and my wonderful wife just gave me great news. She's pregnant. We're going to tell the future grandparents right now. One last thing before I go. Some might say I should have had Caitlin sign a prenuptial agreement because of my past. But if you know Caitlin, you'd know why I didn't. She isn't Janice. She works hard at her job and takes care of our home. She is her mother's daughter and shares her love with me every day. Every time I look into her blue eyes, I see that love. Before moving on to the second story, please let me know your opinion. Do you like the story long or short, a series or separate parts? The comments section is always welcome, and don't forget to let me know which of these two stories you like better. Story 2. 2 years ago, I found out my wife Rhonda was having an affair. We had a huge fight, and I packed my bags and left. I wasn't staying with a cheating wife. Our marriage ended the second she was with another man. I checked into a motel near my office. It wasn't a nice place, but it would do for now. I put my 2 suitcases in the room and went to a nearby bar to get drunk and forget my problems. By walking, I wouldn't risk a DWI. The bar was mostly empty because it was a weeknight. There were a couple of tables with people and one older man at the bar with a beer. I found a booth on the far wall away from everyone else. I didn't want to talk. The bored waitress came over and I ordered a shot of whiskey and a beer. After my second round, I had some time to think. I could sit around feeling sorry for myself, or I could deal with the problem. I was a builder making fancy homes, and it was a busy time. I often had 2 or 3 houses in progress, and when problems came up, I knew it would cost me money if I didn't act fast. With new determination, I went back to the motel for a restless night of sleep. The next morning, I went to the bank and moved all our money from joint accounts into one in my name to protect myself. I canceled all our joint credit cards, keeping 2 that were just mine and the ones for my business. My last stop of the day was my lawyer's office to start the divorce papers. Keith was both my friend and lawyer. He mostly worked with real estate law, but his wife, Shelley, who was also a lawyer, handled family law. They both expressed their sympathies for the tough situation I was in. Then we sat down to discuss the details. They told me that because we lived in a community property state, my wife would get half of everything, and I would need to pay child support. I nodded, saying I knew this, but there was no way I would change my mind. I asked them to start the paperwork. Since we had a daughter, I filed for divorce due to irreconcilable differences instead of infidelity. I had done well in my business, so even giving her half wouldn't hurt much. I just wanted to get rid of my unfaithful wife. That night, I felt better knowing I was taking control. 2 days after I had moved out, I got a call from my 13-year-old daughter, Katie. She said she hadn't seen or heard from her mother since she got home from school and was alone and hungry. Angry, I rushed to my truck and went back home. After comforting Katie, I headed to the kitchen to make her dinner. There, on the fridge, I found an envelope with my name on it in my wife's handwriting. Though curious, I put it aside for later and focused on cooking for Katie. After we ate and watched a bit of TV, I put Katie to bed and returned to the kitchen. I took the envelope and went into the den. I poured myself a drink and sat down to read the note. The note was from my wife. She wrote that if I thought she would stay to raise our child, I was wrong. She said she was leaving and not to look for her. I was in shock. I realized I never truly knew the woman I had married. The idea that a mother could leave her child was incomprehensible to me. I went to our bedroom and saw that most of her clothes and personal things were gone. The next morning, I called Keith and Shelley to talk about this new situation and how it would affect the divorce. Shelley suggested we wait until Monday and go to my wife's workplace together. She would have the divorce papers ready, and we could serve her there. The hardest part was talking to Katie. She knew something was wrong since I hadn't been home for 2 nights. I decided to be honest and told her that her mother had left a note saying she was leaving. I couldn't answer her questions about when her mom would come back as I didn't know myself. We got through the weekend. Monday morning, I made Katie breakfast and took her to school. Then I drove to my wife's workplace and met Shelley there. Together, we asked if my wife was there. We were directed to Human Resources, where we were told that my wife and her boss had both resigned the previous Friday. This made sense, as I had learned she was having an affair with her boss. He probably knew he would lose his job if I made a fuss about it since their relationship was against company policy. Outside in the parking lot, Shelley advised me to file a missing persons report with the police. Since she had been gone for over 48 hours, they would have to take the report and might find her. Shelley followed me to the police station, where a detective took my statement. I told him the whole story, including the note, and what we knew about her and her lover quitting their jobs. He asked if I had an alibi for the day she was last seen, and I assured him I had been at one of my construction sites the entire day. The cop explained that if they found no foul play and she left willingly, they couldn't do much. I then invited Shelley for lunch, and we called her husband to join us at the Olive Garden. We found a quiet table to talk. "So, Shelley, what happens if we can't find her to serve the divorce papers?" I asked. "In this state, you must wait a year before you can file for divorce on the grounds of abandonment," Shelley replied. "That's why I wanted you to report her missing so we have an official record. If the police don't find her, you could hire a private investigator to track her down." I sighed. "Well, I'll wait to hear from the police first. Honestly, I'm not sure I even want to know where she is. Since I wasn't in a hurry to get married again, if ever, I figured waiting a year wasn't that big a deal as long as I didn't have to handle things with her." Shelley looked at me with pity in her eyes when I said I wasn't looking to get married again. She reached over and patted my hand. "Steve, I know this is tough for you, and I know you're hurting. But as your friend, please promise me you won't shut yourself off from life. For now, my focus is on Katie. I know she's even more shocked and hurt than I am. I have to be there for her." Keith and Shelley nodded. They said they understood and would help in any way they could. After lunch, I visited one of my job sites to check on progress and then went to Katie's school to wait for her. As she came out of the building, she looked around anxiously until she saw my truck. She ran towards me as fast as she could. I got out and she threw herself into my arms. She was shaking. "I was scared you wouldn't be here," she cried into my neck. "Oh, baby, I promise I'm not going anywhere," I said, hugging her tight. "Do you really promise?" she asked, looking up at me with big, tearful blue eyes. "Yes, honey, I really promise." I kissed her forehead and carried her to the passenger side of the truck. After fastening her seatbelt, I cursed my wife under my breath as I walked around to get in. With a little encouragement, I got Katie to talk about her school day on the drive home. Once home, Katie wouldn't let me out of her sight. I tried my best to reassure her that I wasn't going to abandon her. Despite this, she started having nightmares. I would wake up to hear her crying in her sleep. I would rush to her room and she would cling to me for dear life. When I asked about her dreams, she said she was lost and couldn't find her mom or me. My office manager, Renee, was a big help during this tough time. I had hired Renee to handle the mundane tasks of my job like filing permits and arranging inspections. This allowed me to focus on more important things. I relied on her completely. She kept the subcontractors on schedule, ordered and tracked materials, and managed all the paperwork. I could go days without stopping by the office, trusting that Renee had it all under control. She even made out checks for the subs and vendors, and I just had to sign them on Fridays. When I decided I needed help running my business, I put an ad in the local paper and started interviewing people. I was getting discouraged when no one seemed to meet my needs. Then Renee walked in. Even though I was married, I could still recognize a good-looking woman. She was about 5'4", with big brown eyes and a cute button nose. She looked to be in her early 30s and was in good shape. She wore a blue business suit that showed off her trim figure without being revealing. The interview went well, and I was impressed by her qualifications. She had worked for her father, who owned a construction company. When I asked why she no longer worked for him, she explained that her husband had been transferred here, so they had to move. I learned she had a daughter the same age as Katie and wanted to return to work now that her daughter was in school. We agreed on her wages, and I had an office manager. But don't get the wrong idea. Nothing happened between us, not even flirting. I was married and took my vows seriously. Even if I wasn't married, she loved her husband and wasn't the type to mess around. I told Renee about my marriage troubles and Katie's nightmares. She quickly suggested that Katie should see a therapist. I realized she was right, and together we found a therapist. I chose a woman therapist because Katie had always been shy around men she didn't know. I met with Dr. Walters to explain everything that had happened and why I felt it was necessary for Katie to see her. We set up a schedule to meet twice a week. Dr. Walters said it would be good if I was available for some sessions and just Katie for others. Meanwhile, after I made a missing person report, the police sent a woman detective to talk to Katie. My daughter told them the last time she saw her mom was Friday morning before school. Her mom had seemed distracted, but Katie hadn't been worried at the time. A week later, the detective asked me to come to the station. He said their investigation found her lover's credit card was used at 2 motels and that they were together by choice, as seen in pictures. The police had decided to stop looking for my wife since they believed she had left the state and there were no signs of foul play. Over the next 2 months, my daughter seemed to be doing better with therapy. She was starting to understand that it wasn't her fault her mother left. More importantly, she realized that I would always be there for her. She had fewer nightmares and no longer needed to keep me in sight all the time. Renee and her husband started inviting Katie and me over for barbecues. At first, I wasn't sure if it was a good idea, but Renee convinced me it would be good for Katie to spend time with her daughter doing normal activities. I had met her husband, James, a few times, but I worried he might not like the idea of his wife inviting her boss over. My concerns were needless. We got along well and quickly became friends. Katie and their daughter Gina also became fast friends. Renee, being a caring mother, made sure to spend time with both girls, giving Katie the motherly guidance she needed. After 10 weeks with no word from my wife, I decided to clear out her stuff from our bedroom. She had taken many of her things, but left some behind. I brought up a couple of large trash bags and started emptying her drawers. In the last drawer, I found a small box hidden at the back. Curious, I opened it and was shocked by what I found. There was a baggie with some marijuana and a vial of white powder. I wasn't naive about drugs. Before I married Katie's mother, I had tried some myself but had stopped after college. I checked the vial and confirmed it was cocaine. The only other thing in the box was a CD. I turned on my computer and put in the CD to see what was on it. It was a movie that had been shot in our basement. The scene showed 4 couples, some with drinks in their hands. 2 of those people were my wife and her boss. I fast-forwarded the movie and saw people smoking joints and snorting lines of white powder off the coffee table. When I fast-forwarded again, I saw my wife involved in activities with multiple men. It made me feel sick to my stomach and I barely made it to the bathroom before throwing up. After I cleaned up, I saw the movie still playing on my computer. Without looking at the screen, I shut it down. I then called Shelley. "Hey, Shelley, it's Steve. Got some time to talk?" "Steve, Keith and I always have time for you. What's going on?" she replied. "I'm getting rid of some of Rhonda's stuff, and I found a box with drugs and a CD. Should I call the police to report the drugs?" "Honestly, Steve, that might not be a good idea. The drugs are in your house, and it would be your word against hers about who they belong to. You're better off getting rid of them." "Wow, I didn't think about that," I said. "What about the CD? It's a video of her and her friends doing drugs and other stuff. It's awful." "Oh, Steve, I'm so sorry you had to see that. Since it was filmed in your home, it could be used as evidence in court if you need it. I suggest you keep it safe, just in case." "That's what I hoped you'd say. I want to do everything I can to keep her away from Katie." "How are things really going?" James asked me during our 4th visit to their house. The girls were inside, out of earshot, preparing lunch. "As well as can be expected when you find out your wife is into drugs and other awful stuff," I answered. "What?" James said, clearly shocked. "I told him about the CD and the drugs I found. I guess I never really knew her. The woman I thought I married would never do something like that. You're lucky to have a woman like Renee." "Actually, I know that," James said. Not a day goes by that I don't thank my lucky stars she chose me. She's beautiful, and I know guys hit on her, but I always trust her to do the right thing, James said with a serious face. Now, if I can just get her boss to stop bothering her, right as I was taking a sip. I couldn't help but splutter, spilling my drink down my shirt. I turned my head sharply to look at him. Jesus, James, you don't think I would ever make a move on Renee? I choked out. I then noticed the amusement in his eyes, and he burst out laughing. Relax, buddy. Renee tells me everything about your relationship. That's why she enjoys working for you so much. You treat her with total respect, and she knows you would never do anything to lose that respect. I grinned back at him. Yeah, well, it's a rule I've always lived by. Not only have I never tried to go after a married woman, but I also won't even make a move if I know the woman has a boyfriend. If you could take a woman from the man she was with, how could you ever trust her not to do the same with the next guy? That's even more true now that it's happened to me. One thing that happened after I found the disc my wife left behind was that, at the next meeting with the therapist, she could tell something big had happened. She asked to see me the next day without Katie. I must say, Dr. Walters knew her stuff. It didn't take her long to get me to open up about what had happened, and soon I was having one-on-one sessions with her. It took a couple of months for her to make me realize that I had been blocking many of my true feelings, and another couple of months to help me accept and deal with them. In the end, she truly helped both Katie and me move past this tough time. When a year had gone by, Shelley put forth my petition for divorce. We didn't need to use the CD as evidence since Rhonda's leaving us, and not making any contact was enough reason for the court to grant the divorce and give me sole custody of our daughter. I still kept the video hidden away just in case Rhonda ever came back and tried to get custody. Just when things seemed to have settled down, another tragedy hit us. James loved cycling and even joined amateur races. During a race, there was a crash and James got a deep bruise on his thigh. No one knew it at the time, but he had developed a blood clot that later traveled to his brain, causing a big stroke. When it happened, we were at work. I was in my office looking over plans for a new house I was about to build when the phone rang. I heard Renee answer the phone. Suddenly she cried out and I rushed out to see her. She had a terrified look on her face. It's James. They've rushed him to the hospital, she blurted out, grabbing her purse. She started to run out of the office and I chased after her. Come on, get in my truck. I'll drive, I said when I caught up with her. She gave me a blank stare at first, then nodded and let me lead her. I put her in the passenger seat and hurried to get behind the wheel. Except for telling me which hospital, she didn't say a word during the ride. When I glanced over at her, I could see her shaking with worry. When we got to the hospital, I pulled up in front of the emergency entrance, and she jumped out and rushed inside. I quickly parked the truck and ran back to the doors. Inside, I saw Renee had already asked about James and looked very upset. I went to her, and she told me the doctors were working on James and didn't know anything yet. I put my arm around her and led her to the waiting area, where we sat down. After about half an hour, I realized it was getting close to time to pick up our daughters from school. Not wanting to leave Renee alone, I called Shelley and briefly explained what was happening. I asked if she could pick up the girls and bring them to the hospital. She assured me she would. I then called the school and asked them to have the girls ready for pickup. Shelley called me just before they arrived, and I told Renee they were here. I went out to meet them and asked Shelley to take Katie with her and keep Renee company while I talked with Jeannie. I took Jeannie to a quiet spot and gently told her that her father had been brought to the hospital and was in the emergency room with the doctors. I told her it seemed serious, but we would have to wait for the doctors to know more. Jeannie tried to be brave and followed me back to the waiting room. I thanked Shelley for her help and promised to call her if we needed more help. For the next half hour, we sat in silence, me hugging Katie and Renee holding Jeannie. Finally, a nurse came out and asked us to follow her to a private room. Soon, a doctor joined us. The news was not good. James was still alive, but he was on life support. Renee broke down in tears, and I held her as she cried. We waited until they moved James to the ICU. Then Renee and Jeannie were allowed to see him. After some time, Renee and Jeannie came back out. Steve, would you look after Jeannie for me? I'm going to stay here, Renee asked me. Jeannie began to protest, so I knelt down in front of her. Sweetie, you need to be strong for your mother right now. Come home with Katie and me, and I will bring you back in the morning. If anything happens, your mother will call us, okay? With tears in her eyes, Jeannie nodded. She hugged her mother and then went to hold hands with Katie. I hugged Renee and told her to call me if anything changed and that I would see her in the morning. That evening was tough. Both girls barely ate dinner and didn't talk much. I got them to bed and then tried to sleep, but it was hard. The next morning, I woke the girls and almost had to force them to eat breakfast. When I told Katie that she had to go to school, she got really upset. I took her aside so Jeannie wouldn't hear. "Honey, please listen to me. Right now, Jeannie needs to be with her mom. There will be a time when she needs you, and you will be there for her, okay?" "All right, Daddy, I understand," she said, though I could tell she wasn't happy about it. "That's my girl," I said and hugged her. After dropping Katie off at school, I took Jeannie to her house. She got us in with her key, and I had her pack fresh clothes and other things her mom might need. When we got to the room James was in, Renee was asleep in a chair next to his bed. I set down the overnight bag we brought and took Jeannie back to the waiting room so her mom could sleep. After about an hour and a half, Renee came out looking tired. Jeannie and I hugged her, and I took her to the cafeteria to buy some breakfast. It took some effort to get her to eat, but it made sense she wasn't hungry. When she finished, I asked at the desk if there was somewhere Renee could shower and change. The nurse was kind and took her to the nurse's locker room. She came back looking a bit better. We spent the rest of the day with Renee and Jeannie taking turns sitting with James, while I stayed in the waiting area, comforting whoever wasn't in the room. The doctors came back around noon to run more tests, but the news wasn't good. When school ended, I picked up Katie and went back to the hospital. We stayed until late evening, then I took the girls home. At 5:30 in the morning, my phone rang. I knew what it was before I picked up. Renee was crying as she told me James had passed away. I told her how sorry I was and that we would be there soon. I quickly got dressed and went to Katie's room. The girls were asleep in her bed. I gently woke Katie and put my finger to her lips before she could speak, signaling her to follow me. I told her Jeannie's father had died, and she started crying. I hugged her. "Honey, Jeannie needs your support now. Get dressed quickly while I talk with her. When you're ready, help her get dressed too. We need to get to the hospital for Renee." Katie nodded, wiping away her tears. "Okay, Daddy, I'll help her." My daughter suddenly seemed older than her 14 years, and I felt proud of her. I then woke Jeannie and told her the sad news about her father. She sobbed, and I held her for several minutes. With Katie's help, she got dressed, and we were on our way. At the hospital, it was heartbreaking to see Renee and Jeannie hugging and crying. Katie also cried and clung to me, as she knew what it was like to lose a parent. I left Katie with Renee and Jeannie and went to talk to the hospital administrators. I told them we would have a funeral home contact them soon. Then, I gently led Renee and Jeannie to the car and drove them home. Once home, I settled them in the den and asked Renee whom we needed to call. She gave me a list that included her parents and James's brother. James's parents had already passed away, and his brother was his only relative. I also called Keith and Shelley. They dropped everything and came over right away. Shelley stayed with Renee while I made the other calls, including one to a funeral home to take care of James's remains. Renee was exhausted from her loss and lack of sleep, so Shelley helped her to bed. I spoke with Shelley afterward. She said she'd handle the estate matters for free and had a copy of James's will. She also mentioned 2 burial plots James had purchased. I thanked Keith and Shelley when they left, then made lunch for the girls. The rest of the day was quiet, with the girls occasionally crying. The emotional strain soon wore the girls out, and they went to bed right after dinner. Jeannie didn't want to sleep alone, so both girls shared the same bed. I stayed in the guest room. After locking up the house for the night, I was so tired I slept through the night. I woke up around 6 to the smell of coffee. Renee was already in the kitchen. She seemed surprised to see me. "Steve, I didn't know you were still here." Jeannie wanted Katie to stay with her, so I stayed in the guest room just in case. She understood what I meant. I told her about the arrangements with the funeral home and that I'd pick up her parents at the airport since they were flying in today. She thanked me for everything. When our daughters finally got up, I told Renee to relax while I made breakfast. Once the kitchen was clean, it was time to head to the airport. I got to the airport early enough to be waiting when they came out. I spotted them right away since I had seen their pictures at Renee's house. "Mr. and Mrs. Hanley, I'm Steve Connors, Renee's boss," I said, holding out my hand. It's nice to meet you, Steve. Please call me Dan, and this is my wife, Victoria. I feel like I almost know you. Our daughter often talks about you. She thinks very highly of you, Renee's father said, shaking my hand. Well, the feeling is mutual. I couldn't do what I do without her help. She and James have become dear friends. I just wish we were meeting under better circumstances. Renee's mother gave me a hug. I liked both of them immediately. We got their luggage and loaded it into the car, heading to their daughter's home. It was a bittersweet reunion, and more tears were shed. Katie and I stayed for lunch before leaving. James's funeral was on Friday. His brother and many friends were there. He was popular because he was easygoing and funny. Many of the subcontractors who worked for me over the years and knew Renee also came to pay their respects. Renee's parents stayed for another 2 days. On Sunday, they invited Katie and me over for lunch. After lunch, we adults went into the living room while Katie and Jeannie went to her room. We talked about everyday things until Renee's mother spoke up. Honey, do you know what your plans are now? You know we would love to have you move back home, Victoria said to her daughter. I know, Mom. You and Dad have always been there to support me, and I love you for that. But this has all been so sudden. Jeannie and I need some time to decide what we are going to do, Renee replied. As soon as I know, I will let you know. Until then, I hadn't thought about the chance that Renee might move away. The idea made me feel empty inside. But as her friend, I would support whatever she decided. I stayed until a little after 5, and before leaving, I took Renee aside. I know you need time to mourn and think about your life now. Take all the time you need. Don't worry about work. If you decide to move back with your parents, I will support your decision. You have to do what's best for you and Jeannie now. If you need anything, please call. I'll always be here for you. Renee teared up and hugged me. Thank you, Steve. I don't think I would have made it this far without you. Renee's father followed Katie and me out to the car. After I had belted her in, he stuck out his hand to me. Steve, Renee has told me how much you have done for her and Jeannie through all this. I want you to know how much Victoria and I appreciate it. I hate to think how much worse it would have been without your support. I shook his hand. Dan, it was the least I could do. She, James, and Jeannie were there for me and Katie after my wife left us. Their love really pulled my daughter out of her sadness. As long as they stay here, you can rely on me to look after them. Over the next 2 weeks, Katie and I visited Renee and Jeannie often. She never mentioned her plans, and I did not push her to decide. Jeannie stayed home with her mother for the first week after the funeral, then returned to school. It was Monday, a week later, when I went to the office and saw Renee's car parked outside. She was sitting at her desk when I walked in. I knew she had made a decision. I stood there, waiting for her to speak. Well, boss, are you going to show me what you messed up in the last couple of weeks so I can fix it? She asked. Does this mean? I started but couldn't finish the question. Yes, it means we're staying. This is Jeannie's home and all her friends are here. Moving would make things harder for her. Besides, we both know you need me to keep the business running. She smiled as she said the last part. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. You sure know how to butter up your boss, I said with a big grin. Then I caught her up on the last 2 weeks' events, and she kicked me out of the office to check on the subcontractors. I don't think I stopped smiling all day. Over the next year, we spent almost every weekend together because of our daughter's friendship. Renee and I went to the girls' sports events and other school activities. If there were no school events, the girls usually came to my house. I always made sure Renee came too so she wouldn't feel lonely. Our friendship grew and there was nothing we couldn't talk about. For Katie, Renee became like a second mother. She could talk to her about things she was too embarrassed to discuss with me. I guess I also became a father figure to Jeannie. When it came to discipline, the girls would often giggle at me and Renee had to step in. Both girls knew they had me wrapped around their little fingers. Luckily, they were good kids, and we rarely had to deny them anything. One Saturday, just over a year after James had passed, I had to deal with a small issue at one of the houses I was building. When I got back home, I saw Renee's car in the driveway. We had planned a barbecue and a day of lounging around the pool. When I came into the house, I could hear the girls laughing and giggling out back. So I went to the laundry room to get my swim trunks. I usually change in my bedroom, but today I thought I'd just use the downstairs bathroom. With my suit in hand, I opened the bathroom door and froze. There was Renee, reaching for her bikini top, wearing only a pair of panties. I had seen her in a bikini before, but never like this. Her body was something I couldn't take my eyes off. Her chest was perfect and just wow. I know I only stood there for a couple of seconds, but it felt much longer. Renee gasped and quickly covered her chest. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," I said, stumbling over my words. I turned around fast, shut the door behind me, and ran to the living room. I felt so embarrassed. I hoped I hadn't messed up our friendship and that she didn't hate me. 10 minutes later, Renee came out in her bikini. I think she could see how sorry I felt. "Renee, I'm sorry. I heard the girls by the pool and thought you were out there too. I didn't mean to walk in on you," I said quickly. She tried to look mad, but only managed for about 10 seconds before she laughed. She walked over and patted my cheek. "Steve, I know you wouldn't do that on purpose." "It's okay. Don't worry about it. Now go get changed and put the chicken on the grill. I'm hungry." She turned and headed for the pool, leaving me standing there with my mouth open. I sighed in relief that she wasn't mad. I hurried to change and went out back. Renee was sipping wine while the girls played in the pool. I grilled the chicken, trying not to stare at Renee. I couldn't get the image of her in the bathroom out of my mind. After we ate, we lounged in recliners, soaking up some sun. We started talking like we always did. During a quiet moment, Renee looked at me and smirked. I felt myself blush. The sun was setting when they left. Jeannie had invited Katie to spend the night, so she went with them. As they headed to the car, Renee came and kissed me on the cheek with another sly grin. I let out a sigh of relief when they had gone. At least my mistake hadn't ruined our friendship. I went to my home office to do some paperwork before heading to bed. Only when I was in bed did my mind go back to what had happened earlier. The image of Renee standing there almost naked filled my head. That thought made me feel really confused and guilty. Shaking my head, I knew I had to focus on other things. The next week was a confusing one for me. Whenever I was in the office, I'd catch myself staring at Renee. I didn't get my feelings. For the last 2 years, I hadn't felt the need to be with anyone or even around women. But Renee was different. She was my friend. So I spent a lot of time at the construction sites and away from the office to clear my head. 2 big things were happening the next Saturday. First, Renee and I were dropping our daughters off at a 2-week sleepaway camp. Second, there was an awards night hosted by the local building association. It was in a hotel ballroom with dinner, awards, and dancing planned. Renee was going with me. Saturday morning, Renee and I dropped the girls off at camp. They were so excited they almost forgot to say goodbye. That got Renee and me laughing as I took her back home. I dropped her off, told her I'd pick her up at 6, and then went back to my house. I spent the day working in the garden to keep my thoughts clear. At 6, I knocked on Renee's door. When she opened it, my jaw dropped. She wore a little black dress that was classy and elegant. She had on a pearl necklace, black heels, and stockings. "Wow, you look amazing," I stuttered. She gave me a big smile. "Why, thank you, kind sir." Even though I wanted to keep looking at her, I kept my eyes on the road. Our talk was friendly and casual, like always. At the event, we sat at a table with 3 other builders and their wives. We were all spec builders. Most of the talk was about work. Dinner was either fish or chicken, and it was pretty good, which doesn't always happen at these events. Our attention turned to the stage when it was time for the awards. When they announced the award for quality, my name was called. Renee jumped up with joy. I kept my thank you speech short. Thanks to the association for this recognition, but a big thanks to Renee. This award is as much hers as it is mine. Her support got me here. When I returned to our table, Renee hugged me with tears in her eyes and surprised me with a kiss on the lips. It felt special, even though it wasn't a cheek kiss. My heart raced. After the awards, the dance floor opened up. I got a lot of congratulations from my peers and then asked Renee if she wanted to dance. She said yes, and we headed to the floor. The first song was fast. I'm not a great dancer, but she looked so graceful. The next song was slow, and I was about to take her back to the table when she stepped into my arms and put her arms around my neck. I didn't pull away. I put my arms around her waist and we swayed to the music. It had been over 2 years since I held a woman, and holding her felt different. I tried to step back, but she wouldn't let me. I just hoped she didn't notice my reaction. When the song ended, We went back to the table. Renee finished her glass of wine and looked at me. Steve, how about ending this evening with a soak in your hot tub? I didn't want the night to end, so I agreed quickly. We talked about the award and how it could help the business as we drove home. My home had all the latest tech. I could control everything from my phone, including the hot tub. I got it ready while we drove. Since Renee and her friend Jeannie often used my pool, they left their swimsuits at my place. I fetched them. Renee went to the bathroom to change, and I changed in the laundry room. I grabbed a bottle of wine and 2 glasses and got into the hot tub to wait for her. When she came out in her swimsuit, it took my breath away. She joined me in the water and accepted the glass of wine. For the first 10 minutes, we didn't talk. We just enjoyed the warm water. Then she broke the silence. Steve, it's been 2 years since Rhonda left. Have you thought about dating again? I blushed, thankful for the darkness. I didn't want to lie. Honestly, until recently I hadn't thought about it. It hurt too much. You said until recently. Has something changed? She asked. I looked at her and saw a knowing smile. She set her glass down and then, to my surprise, her bikini top floated to the surface of the water. She rose slightly and I could see her out of the water. Was it seeing me like this? Oh God, Renee, I whispered, feeling overwhelmed. She moved closer and sat on my lap, facing me, her arms around my neck. When James died, I didn't think I could feel for anyone again. But we had talked about moving on if something happened to one of us. I will always love James, but I have room in my heart for someone else. We looked into each other's eyes. Steve, please say something. Am I making a fool of myself? She asked, worried. I finally spoke. No, you're not. I've been fighting my feelings for you because I didn't want to risk our friendship. We kissed deeply, and it felt right. My hand moved up her side, making her sigh. Everything felt intense and real. Steve, I want this, she said softly. Me too, I replied. Let me taste you, Renee whispered. My ex-wife never let me finish in her mouth, but Renee's request sent me into the most intense climax. The sensation of her swallowing made me shiver. Only when I had nothing left to give did she let me go. She smiled and licked her lips. Was that okay? Oh, baby, it was more than okay. I've never felt anything like that before. She giggled. I pulled her into a kiss and slid off the edge, lowering the bottoms of her bikini. Now it's your turn, I said as I lifted her out of the water and set her on the side of the tub. She opened her legs and I saw her for the first time. She was clean-shaven with a small strip of hair. I've always enjoyed giving pleasure, and I immediately started. I didn't want to tease her too much since it had been so long for her. She was just as eager as I was. In no time, she was pulling me closer and crying out as she reached her peak. I slowed down but didn't stop. I wanted her to feel every moment. When she was close again, I slipped 2 fingers inside and gently played with her. She screamed as her whole body shook. I held her as she came down from her high and then brought her back into the water, holding her in my lap. For a while, she just rested her head on my chest, shuddering now and then. Finally, she looked up at me. Oh, Steve, that was amazing. Thank you. I needed that. My pleasure, my love. We cuddled in the hot tub for a while before I carried her to the bathroom and into the shower. She purred softly as I washed her. She quickly washed me too, and we dried off, rushing to the bed. My need for her grew stronger. I want you inside me, Steve. Please go slowly. It's been a while, she said. I took my time, gently entering her. She was tight, and we moved slowly. Eventually, she pushed her hips up, taking me deeper. We set a rhythm, and she urged me on. Yes, Steve, I need this, she cried out. I wanted to make her feel good, so I did my best. Our bodies moved together perfectly. I'm coming. Come with me, she shouted. Her body tightened around me, and I reached my peak with her. We shared a passionate kiss and then lay together, holding each other. When we caught our breath, I looked at Renee. She blushed and tried to hide. Baby, what's wrong? I asked. She turned even redder. Oh, Steve, the things I said. You must think I'm awful, she said quietly. I laughed. Sweetheart, hearing you say those things excited me. You can talk like that any time, I said playfully. You're terrible, she said. But I like it. Even now, I can't stop thinking about you. As she spoke, she touched me again. My desire for her grew quickly. I turned her over and slowly entered her once more. Soon we moved together, our passion taking over. "Yes, yes," she cried, "make me yours." "Come for me," I shouted. "You're mine now." Our release was intense. Afterward, we collapsed into bed, exhausted. We fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms. I slept deeply like I hadn't in years. When I woke the next morning, the sun was shining. Renee was still asleep, curled up next to me. I watched her, admiring her beauty. She slowly woke up and smiled at me. "Good morning, beautiful," I said. Good morning, stud," she giggled. She touched me again. "Are you always like this in the morning?" I grinned. "What can I say? You bring it out of me. I'd stay like this forever if I could." She gave me a playful smile, rolled me onto my back, and straddled my hips. She took my hand and guided me close to her, slowly sitting down until I was fully inside her. She looked into my eyes as she started moving up and down at a gentle pace. For about 5 minutes, she kept this slow rhythm. Then I reached up and touched her gently. She let out a surprised sound and began moving faster. I kept touching her, feeling her warmth spread and her excitement growing. She was so passionate that I had to focus not to finish too soon. I managed to hold on until her eyes rolled back and she pushed down hard one last time. "Wow!" I shouted. My excitement added to her pleasure, and she trembled until she collapsed onto my chest. I held her tight as she relaxed in my arms. Finally, she said she was hungry. We got out of bed, showered quickly, and headed to the kitchen. I made us some Denver omelets and watched her eat with a smile. After cleaning up, we took our coffee to the back deck and sat quietly, enjoying each other's company. "Did you mean it, Steve?" she suddenly asked. I was puzzled. "Mean what, honey?" "That I belong to you," she said with a cute blush. "Renee, we have known each other for 7 years. For the first 5, you were my closest friend, the person I relied on. 2 years ago, you became more than a friend when you helped me and Katie during a tough time. In the past year, you have become my dearest and closest friend. I can't deny it anymore. I love you deeply. So the answer is yes, I want you to be mine. But more than that, I want your heart. I want to belong to you completely. My heart, my soul, all of me." Her eyes filled with tears. At first, I thought I made a mistake by telling her my true feelings. Then she jumped into my lap and kissed me passionately. "I love you too, darling. I want us to belong to each other, and I promise you I am all yours." We spent the rest of Sunday enjoying each other's company in every part of the house. Monday morning, we woke up together, showered, and went to her place for fresh clothes before heading to the office. While she made coffee, I looked over the day's paperwork. I gave her a kiss and went out to check on the 3 houses we had under construction. At lunchtime, I brought back some Chinese takeout and we ate together. After we finished, I started explaining how the work was going, but she cut me off by reaching down and undoing my belt and pants. I struggled to keep talking as she began to touch me. I soon lost my train of thought and could only watch her. She looked up at me as she continued, and I felt myself getting close to finishing. I reached down to touch her hair. "Yes, just like that," I said, and soon after I was done. She looked satisfied as she finished. She looked up and smiled. "That was great." I laughed. "Well then, how about sitting here on my desk?" She giggled, lifted her dress, and sat in front of me. I was a bit surprised she wasn't wearing underwear. "Why aren't you wearing anything under your dress?" I asked. "In my bag." "I wanted to be ready in case you wanted to be close," she giggled. I got right to it since someone could walk in any moment, but managed to make her happy twice before the phone rang. After work, we went to Renee's house so she could pack a bag and stay with me for the next 2 weeks while the girls were at camp. We didn't even need to talk about it. We both knew what was happening. Those 2 weeks were filled with joy, and we only had a couple of moments at the office. I did enjoy being close to her there, though. Finally, Friday came, the day before we were to pick up the girls. We needed to talk about our future. We agreed on 2 things. First, we didn't want to live apart, and she was willing to move in with me. More importantly, we needed to consider what the girls thought and wanted. We decided I would drop her and her daughter Jeannie at their house after picking up the girls. I would take my daughter Katie home, and we would talk with our daughters. I was pretty sure Katie would be happy with Renee and Jeannie moving in. She and Jeannie were already like sisters, and Renee was like a mother to her. My real worry was how Jeannie would feel. I was afraid she might think we were forgetting her father. We decided that if either or both of the girls didn't agree, we wouldn't live together. But we would stay committed to each other and wait until they either approved or graduated high school and went to college. When Katie and I got home, I started making lunch while she told me all about her time at camp. It was clear both girls had a lot of fun. An hour after we finished eating, Katie finally calmed down, giving me a chance to talk to her about Renee and me. Katie, over the past year, we've spent a lot of time with Renee and Jeannie. It feels like we have become a family, I said. Katie nodded in agreement. While you were at camp, Renee and I talked a lot, and we thought it might be time to actually become one family. What does that mean, Daddy? She asked, curiosity in her eyes. It means I would like Renee and Jeannie to come live with us. When the time is right, I want to make Renee my wife, but we will only do that if both you and Jeannie agree. Katie squealed with excitement and hugged me tightly. Oh, Daddy, that's wonderful. Jeannie will really be my sister then, and I already love Renee like a mother. I've got to call Jeannie. Hold on, Pumpkin, I said, stopping her in her tracks. Renee will talk to Jeannie about this. She might feel differently, so let's wait to see how she feels, okay? Katie thought about it for a minute and then smiled, shrugging her shoulders. Okay, Daddy, I'll wait. The wait wasn't long. In less than 20 minutes, the house phone rang. It was Renee. She told me that Jeannie wanted to talk to Katie but didn't say anything more. Nervously, I handed the phone to my daughter and she ran to her room to talk in private. Teenagers can spend a long time talking on the phone, and this time was no different. After an hour, my nerves were shot. Suddenly, Katie ran from her room and out the front door. I heard what sounded like happy squealing. Before I could get to the door, Katie came back in with Jeannie. The two girls quickly hugged me with joy. I then looked up to see a smiling Renee coming through the door carrying 2 suitcases. Just as quickly as I had been the center of their hugs, the 2 girls broke away and ran to Renee, grabbed the suitcases, and disappeared upstairs. I stood there, mouth open, until Renee walked over and gave me a big, loving kiss. Did everything go as well as we hoped? I asked when we finally separated. Apparently, our daughters had already talked about this and were all for it. They were just waiting for us to realize we wanted it too, she said with a laugh. We went out to dinner that night to celebrate becoming one big family. On Sunday, we made trips to Renee's house to bring their things to their new home. Renee and I decided she would sell her house since the real estate market was pretty good. She offered to put the money in a joint account, but I had a better idea. We put it in a savings account for Jeannie's college. I felt that James would be happy knowing this money was for his daughter's education. The next year was wonderful, even though I was outnumbered 3-1 by females. They usually got their way, but it made me happy to make them happy. On the rare occasion I disagreed, they accepted it. Also, our romantic life was very active, and I could hardly keep my hands off Renee. She seemed happy to keep me satisfied as well. Thanks to an award I received, many people asked me to build homes for them. My business grew, and sometimes I had 10 houses under construction at once. Renee started working with me in the field, and we hired another person for the office. Renee handled the hiring since she knew what needed to be done. Renee and I got married the next spring. We kept the wedding small and informal, inviting only close friends. Shelley was Renee's bridesmaid, and Keith was my best man. We went to Fiji for a week-long honeymoon and even managed to see the sights. Shortly after Renee and Jeannie moved in, Katie started calling Renee Mom. I was happy they had bonded so well. Jeannie didn't call me Dad until just after her 17th birthday. I don't remember what she wanted, but I'll never forget the moment she kissed me on the cheek and said, "Thank you, Daddy." That simple act brought tears to my eyes, and I saw that Renee was also moved. In my mind, both Katie and Jeannie were my daughters, and I loved them equally. That moment was surpassed many times over a few weeks later. Renee was out shopping, and the girls and I were at home when they came in and sat down. I could tell from their faces that something important was going on. "Daddy, I'm your daughter and you love me, right?" Katie asked. "Of course I do, sweetie," I replied, curious about where this was leading. "Well, I think you love Jeannie like you love me, don't you?" she continued. I glanced at Jeannie. She looked nervous but was watching me closely. "You both know that I love you equally." Then why haven't you adopted her so she can really be my sister? Katie asked. I was shocked. I turned to Jeannie. Honey, I would love nothing more than to make you my daughter. Would you like me to adopt you? Tears filled her eyes and her chin shook. Yes, Daddy, I really would. Tears started running down my face, too. I opened my arms and she ran into them. Just then, Renee came home and saw Jeannie in my lap, both of us crying. Before she could ask what was happening, Katie whispered to her. Renee put down her bags and came over quickly, and now all three of us were hugging and crying happy tears. I looked up at Katie and saw she was crying, too. I held out one hand for her to join us. That afternoon, our family bond became complete. From the pain of 2 difficult times in the lives of 2 families, our love and hope had been renewed. Life was good. Hey, audience! If you liked this video and want to keep up with more thrilling stories, make sure to subscribe to Prince Cheating Tales and hit the notification bell. You don't want to miss out on our upcoming adventures. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next wonderful story.